Welcome, everyone. I'm Stella Tarnay on the steering committee of the Washington, D.C. area Citizen Science Network. And this is our late winter, almost spring meeting of the network. Today, it's hard to know what season we're in, but let's say late winter. And so glad that you could all join us on this really important topic. And I'm going to ask our fellow steering committee members to kind of raise their hand when I introduce them. So I see there's Mary Ford on the steering committee, and Carrie Seltzer, Robert Costello, and Carolyn Haynes. And if you all could just kind of wave, we're so glad you could join us. The Citizen Science Network has been meeting now for almost 5 years. I can't believe it. In the best of times, we meet in person, and Robert Costello provides bagels and cream cheese and coffee for us at the Natural History Museum. And we look forward to that, but we'll do our best with this virtual gathering. And I'm going to pick on either Carrie or Mary to say why we created the network and what it's about. And since I picked on Carrie last time, I think I'll go ahead and ask Mary to talk about the network.
Yeah, sure. I was just thinking about having coffee with you, Stella, sometime 6 years ago. And you were sharing this idea with me about setting up this network, bringing together people who were doing citizen science around the region. And it's so fun to see that it came to fruition and is still thriving even throughout the pandemic. So yeah, we wanted to create a community of practice so we could learn from each other. We all were hearing in lots of different places about these incredible innovative projects going on, and knew that we'd be better together. And so we started having these periodic gatherings, and then also engaging in support of some other events like the City Nature Challenge, and sometimes having some events related to the Citizen Science Association and their conferences. So I look forward to continuing to grow that. I am at the Jane Goodall Institute now, which works nationally and internationally, but is based in downtown DC, and someday look forward to hosting an event here as well. And I can provide bagels too.
We look forward to that. Thanks, Mary. And I realized that I forgot to introduce the person closest and nearest to me, Annika Hanui, who let you all in, my fellow co-founder of Capital Nature and also a steering committee member. So
thank you.
I'm so glad you're here, Anna, as always. Our two speakers today are really, really interesting people working in really interesting organizations, and they're part two of our continuing conversation on citizen science as a conservation tool. And I don't need to tell any of you how important it is now that we start paying attention to our natural environment, especially in our urban areas. And we think citizen scientists are an important part of that. And last time when we had our December meeting, we launched our conversation with Jorge Bogantes-Matera, who's here. Hey, Jorge, good to see you. And he talked to us about the really interesting work that the Anacostia Watershed Society is doing with citizen science. And then Allison Clausen also talked to us about the Forest Patch Project in Northeast DC, and how quote unquote regular residents, like all of us on this call at some level, just decided to rescue a forest patch, and citizen science has become a big part of that. And their work is actually influencing policy and conservation plans, pretty much kind of DC focused and somewhat Maryland. So for this talk, we wanted to spread out beyond the borders of DC and a little further into Maryland. So we're looking at two organizations and their work, one in Virginia and one in Maryland. They might be old friends too, but they'll tell you a new story, I'm sure. So our first speaker is going to be Michael Myers. Welcome, Michael. If you could raise your hand and say hello. Thanks. So Michael is the executive director of the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. And I didn't know about the Conservancy's work until a few years ago, and was just pretty amazed. They've been doing citizen science for over 25 years. And the work of those citizen scientists in Loudoun County has been influencing conservation decisions, land use decisions, and just really increasing the knowledge on biodiversity. And as you know, Loudoun County is an extremely dynamic county, so at a time when it's really important. And our second speaker, plus one, is going to be Eliza Cava, who is the head of conservation at Nature Forward. And she'll be joined by Greg Trilling, who is the manager of the, and I love to say this, the Creek Critters program at Nature Forward. And they'll be talking to us about over 30 years of citizen science work that's been going on with Nature Forward and how they're influencing conservation decisions on watersheds in Maryland. So really, really great topics. And I know we'll have great presenters. So at this point, I'd like to turn the virtual stage over to Michael, who is going to tell us about Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy's work. Michael?
Great, thanks, Stella. So I will share my screen. So I am Michael Myers. I'm the executive director of the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. And so we work in Loudoun County in Northern Virginia. And our mission is to preserve, protect, and restore wildlife habitat here in Loudoun County. And we do that through our four main program areas. So we have advocacy, education, habitat conservation, and citizen science. And so within that, we have over 15 different program areas in our organization. And we're a small nonprofit. I'm the one full-time paid staff member. We have 4 part-time staff members. And then all of our programs are run by volunteers. So last year we had over 375 volunteers contributed over 12,500 hours of their time to make our programs happen, which is really, truly incredible. And so we're a membership organization that is volunteer driven, and that remains to this day. We were founded in 1995. As Stella mentioned, citizen science has been a core component of our programs or of our organization since our inception. So within our citizen science programs, we have 5 different programs. So we have bird counts, which includes monthly bird walks, in addition to a spring Celebrate Birds and Birdathon and Christmas bird counts. We manage a bluebird nest box trail. We have amphibian monitoring counts. We have butterfly counts, and we have stream monitoring programs. And so I just wanted to highlight a little bit two stories that have some caveats to them for you, and how we're using citizen science as a conservation tool here in Loudoun County. And one of the examples I want to raise is at Bless Park, which is a park in Loudoun County at the confluence of Broad Run and the Potomac River. It's about 139 acres. And this is, it was a park that was proffered. So it was given to the county when there was a nearby development, an adjacent development. And with that, it was previously farmland. It was a sod farm. And so they did some they constructed some wetlands there. And it's mostly a natural area, but at the same time, at that time, it was allowed for Loudoun County zoning to build active recreation uses. So there are 4 soccer fields also in the park, and most of the park is floodplain. So we would argue that they should never have built those they never should have built those soccer fields, but that's where we are. And so with that, there was a small parking area because it's in a floodplain, so they purposely left the area small. Well, over the last couple of years, or a couple of years ago, they decided to go through a master planning process, and it was kind of spurred by the lack of parking for these soccer fields. And so they needed to increase, it was causing some public safety issues because parking along the street was crowded, and you had these children walking across this road to get to these soccer fields, which is understandable. But what they did was, when they started the master planning process, is they kind of threw in the kitchen sink of what they wanted to add to this park in terms of other park amenities, which included a proposed maintenance facility and an additional parking area, allowing a closed road to be open for vehicular traffic for a kayak launch, a boardwalk alongside the wetlands on the property, increasing the area of the parking or area of the playground, and also adding tennis, pickleball courts, and a dog park. So we were highly concerned. Bless Park has some of the highest birding biodiversity in all of Loudoun County. This picture, as you can see there, is a stand of milkweed. This is next to a stormwater management pond. So at this property, There are 2 rivers. There are ponds on the property, and there are also wetlands, as I mentioned as well. And so with that, we started leading bird walks to this property, collecting data on the species that are found there. And it's truly a unique habitat here where, we get stopovers of some birds that are seldom seen, recorded anywhere else in Loudoun County. Will stop by at Bless Park. And then so armed with this data, when this proposal came forward, we were alarmed. And so what we did is we reached out to the Parks and Rec staff and cautioned them about our concerns. And then as the process went through the legislative development process, we were in touch, we made comments throughout the process to county staff, to the Planning Commission, and also to the Board of Supervisors. And one of the things that we developed as part of this process is tools and graphics such as this map. And this map here, you can see the park, you see the soccer fields off to the left. In the middle there with the blue outline is the existing wetlands. The reddish orange line is where they want to open up a road alongside the wetlands. And then the darker red line is where they're proposing to build a boardwalk as well. And the colored spheres around this are the flight initiation distance of waterfowl. So one of our key arguments was, we know the biodiversity of these different types of ducks here, and then we're able to pair that with other scientific studies on human impacts that will cause waterfowl and shorebirds to fly if there is noise. And so what we illustrated was basically the whole wetlands is impacted. And this shows some minimum distances and average distances. And basically one of the arguments was, oh, well, this type of thing has been done in other places in Northern Virginia, such as Huntley Meadows. They have a boardwalk through their wetlands. And we're like, yeah, but Huntley Meadows is 1,500 acres. This park is 130 acres. And the wetlands at Huntley Meadows is bigger than the entirety of this whole park, not this 6 acres of wetlands we have. So we were able to take that citizen science data, put it into action to try to influence policy decisions. Unfortunately, some of the improvements were still proposed and moving forward, but we remain engaged. We were able to get some of the amenities removed from the floodplain, and then we still are remaining engaged and have ongoing discussions with the Parks and Rec staff about pollinator habitat and protecting that, and potentially putting up some wildlife blinds that may minimize the need for a boardwalk instead. So it's an ongoing process, but that's just one area where we engaged our citizen scientists on the uniqueness of the property. And then one of our other crowning achievements, a recent crowning achievement that we're really proud of, is J.K. Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary. So this is an 89-acre parcel of land outside of Luckett's, Virginia, which is north of Leesburg. It is designated as a globally rare wetland by Virginia DCR because there's lots of vernal pools. We have over 15 vernal pools on the property. And what we've been able to do is engage almost all of our citizen science programs. Obviously, amphibian monitoring, we knew how special this property was. We didn't know how special. So we had DCR come out and they're like, it's globally rare wetland. And from there, we were able to engage funders. We're engaging with the Nature Conservancy. We're doing a wetlands mitigation project here to create additional wetlands on the property, in addition to individual donors to do projects. And so since then, we've been using citizen science to study the property, birds, butterflies, dragonflies, amphibians, and also bats and stream monitoring, which I'll get into on how we're turning that citizen science data into action. So we have all these programs across different areas, advocacy, habitat conservation, education, in addition to citizen science. And so instead of just having the data available for academic use, we're like, well, how do we as an organization internally turn this data into action? And so here are a couple stream monitors counting macroinvertebrates on the property. And so we surveyed on the eastern edge of our property. There's a stream. There's some frontage of Route 15, which is a major travel corridor. And our neighboring parcel is a mobile home community in the village of Luckett's. And so we surveyed our stream, our upstream site and a downstream site, and the upstream score was great. It was like, things are going well. but when we surveyed the downstream site, the score wasn't so well. And we're like, what's going on here? Like, this isn't a very long stretch of stream. What's happening? Well, the mobile home community, as it turns out, has a non-functioning wastewater treatment facility, including, suspended solids and all kinds of nasty things getting put into the water. And so what we were able to do is take that data. We reached out to DEQ. They expedited enforcement action. The EPA actually got involved and has done an enforcement action. So they have 2 years to build a new wastewater treatment facility at that mobile home community to address that issue, which that's great. But over 2 years, this is a karst limestone area. So where's that water going? There's a lot of E. coli, like massive amounts of E. coli and suspended solids in the stream. So what can we do in the short term? And so what we did is we wrote a grant, and we were funded a grant for just over $40,000 to engage with one of our local accredited lab to test the stream water, stream site for E. coli, but then we also did tap water testing for residents in the mobile home community in Luckett's. So our neighbors are one mobile home community, and there's a second mobile home community in Luckett's as well. So we were able to test 17 different homes for their well water, and then from that we determined they didn't have E. coli in their tap water, which was great, but they still weren't drinking the water. And these people are paying hundreds of dollars a month on bottled water because they didn't feel that their water was safe to drink. And it turns out that their water was just really hard. So we had a full analyte panel test it, and it was really hard water, so it wasn't clear. It had some sedimentation in it. And so we were able to get, through the grant, some descalers installed on the property or in these homes. And so every year we calculated out each family is going to be saving approximately $14,000 per year. And we gave them enough filters for 4 years. So that's going to save them over $244,000 over the course for those 17 families. And they're able to drink their tap water now. So that was a really great highlight of how we've turned citizen science into action. And then additionally, we've been studying the property. So these are I forgot to update, this isn't stream monitoring, this is amphibian monitoring. So these are eastern spadefoots. And I don't know how many people are familiar with eastern spadefoots. They're mostly found in coastal areas, in sandy areas, like many frogs and amphibians. They come out on warm rainy days like we're having today. Actually heard my first spring peepers this morning. And so we have members who've been searching for these elusive amphibians for years and have never been able to find them. Well, our citizen science amphibian monitoring team were alerted that they were hearing calls when it was like 45 degrees outside at a vernal pool at Algonquian Park in eastern Loudoun County. And we had heard them at our property as well. So our team went out to our property, had it documented explosive breeding of these amphibians and have tons of data. And so here's some different pictures at different stages. And it's really remarkable. And it's one of the first records now with the Virginia Herpetological Society of eastern spadefoots in Loudoun County. And our program coordinator actually presented at a regional conference on amphibians about this whole explosive breeding, and it blew all of these academics away. They're like, well, where did you find it, and like in what soils, and the temperature, and like everything was completely different from what people had known about eastern spadefoots. So it's really potentially a paradigm shift on where and when to look for these amphibians that they come out to breed and then they just dig back into the ground. And so there's not a lot of data known about it. And we were able to do to capture all that data through citizen science. And we're working on grants to get some bioacoustic monitoring and put it in different places in the county, because we feel that they are probably way more prevalent than anybody realizes, just because we don't know what we don't know. But then also on our property, here's another vernal pool that's found on our property. One of our volunteers set up bat monitoring stations. So as I mentioned, this property is adjacent to Route 15, which anybody's been heard in the news. The county board of supervisors has voted to widen Route 15 from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road. It's currently a scenic highway. And then there's a potential for a bypass around the village of Luckett's. So originally that bypass, proposed bypass would have gone straight through the middle of our property. But now that we've purchased it, the Virginia DCR, part of that globally rare designation is because it's at a high risk of threat of extirpation of local species. And so this road project is obviously a threat, but we set up bat monitoring on the property, and we've recorded many bat species, but including the northern long-eared bat, which has been an endangered, federally endangered or threatened species that is getting upgraded to endangered. And so with that data, what we're doing is we're working on how do we get that data to Virginia DWR, Fish and Wildlife Service, so they can verify our acoustic observations that we've used using citizen science data. And that's been all following the NABIT, Northern American Bat Association's protocols. So we know they're there, they're vernal pools. We have lots of data and times on when they were there. They're likely roosting there as the summertime. So how is that going to inform future decisions on potential bypass alignments? This is going to be an ongoing until the design phase. And so with that, the staff recommendation, while the Board of Supervisors did ultimately approve a conservation plan amendment, comprehensive plan amendment to widen Route 15 with a potential bypass around Luckett's on the western side, it wouldn't go through our property. And the staff recommendation is to avoid impacts to our property. So with that, we're doing additional follow-up data based on this original citizen science data, with the goal that we will then have more data and so they can make better informed decisions on the design phase of this road project. And also, in that corner of our property, we have amphibians. There are vernal pools on the other side of the road as well. This karst limestone topography has vernal pools all over the place. And so part of our goals of protecting this property is not only to protect the unique resources found on it, but also to hopefully serve as a model and catalyst for conserving other adjacent lands as well, because it's really on that landscape scale. There's lots of vernal pools in the area north of Leesburg, and we really want to use this data as a paradigm shift, and whether that's clean water because of non-functioning wastewater treatment plants, or discovering eastern spadefoots in places that nobody would have expected them to be, or rare, threatened, or endangered bat species. So those are some of the ways that we are taking data and putting it into action here in Loudoun County, just through our own programs, let alone the opportunities that citizen science data provides as it gets compiled into big data numbers. We have an iNaturalist project for our property. We use eBird for all of our bird walks. And then one of the other future opportunities that we're looking at is to also use our stream monitoring program. And one of the things that they're doing is collecting salt watch data. So they're using salt watch to collect data on road salt and excessive road salt. And we started that last year. We're doing it again this year. And we're looking to use those data points to also do a future advocacy action and an education campaign on excessive road salting, whether that's with VDOT. It seems to be a little bit more responsible, but what we're seeing, some of the highest offenders are actually HOAs that contract different companies to do the road salt in HOAs, and then all that runs off into streams. So that's another avenue we're looking at to take citizen science data into action here in Loudoun County.
Michael, thank you. That was absolutely riveting, all the work that you're doing. While Eliza and Greg are setting up, I have one question for you, and that is, who are your citizen scientists and how do you engage them with observation?
Sure. So our citizen science are just volunteers. So we're a membership organization. We have over 1,100 members. And then, we put out calls to volunteers, and then we do trainings for each of our program areas has different sets of protocols. So we all use protocols that are being done on the state or national level. And then we train our volunteers every year on those protocols to engage more citizen scientists.
And can you say again the areas that you're focused on for observation?
Yep, we do bird counts, butterfly counts, bluebird nest box monitoring, amphibian monitoring, and stream monitoring.
Great, thank you very much.
We
So
had
now
one,
go ahead.
we had one question in the chat. Can I go ahead and ask that question,
Yeah,
Stella?
go ahead. Yeah, good idea.
Michael, from Lucila, are you using bat houses or acoustics for monitoring on the property?
It's bioacoustics. So this volunteer is actually through the Banshee Reefs Virginia Master Naturalist. So he has a lot of different quadrants throughout Loudoun County, and they have devices that he goes to record the sounds, and then he pulls the memory cards and runs it through a filtering program, and then he's able to connect with other experts to try to verify sounds that they're not sure about.
Got it. Thank you. And then just another quick question. Do you provide training for the citizens? I think you answered this. For the citizen scientists, or are they chosen based on experience?
So we will train all of them. So whatever program it is, we'll have training. So like for stream monitoring, we use Virginia Save Our Streams protocols. We have certified stream monitors and a training program for that. So depending on the program, it's a different training protocol. But we'll train anybody that shows an interest.
Thank you so much.
In fact, I attended your amphibian training just a week or two ago, and it was lovely. And I learned a lot about the difference between swamps and marshes and vernal pools, and then the critters associated with them. And it was free. So I would encourage anyone in the region, if you guys don't mind, it's a great way to learn about observation and the ecosystems. Loudoun does some really great programming. So now I think let's go ahead and tee up Eliza and Greg, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Hello, thanks, Stella, and thanks, Michael. A tough act to follow. So Greg's queuing up our presentation, and it's got the title Water Quality Monitoring Program. We're actually going to walk you through 3 different projects that we've done, as well as a couple of examples of conservation. I should say, I'm Eliza Cava, the Director of Conservation at Nature Forward. We serve the whole DC region, and we're formerly Audubon Naturalist Society. And we're going to talk about these 3 specific programs or projects and some of the ways that we've used their data and information to do conservation and conservation decision making. But I also wanted to just mention that we do use citizen science in a lot of other ways, and we try to call it community science. We use both terms interchangeably, but we do work with and are increasingly working with more and more non-citizens for whom, even though citizen science is not about your governmental citizenship status, it can be a challenging word for them. So we use community science with them and in general. And then some of our other projects are including that at our nature sanctuary in Chevy Chase. We have a 40-acre nature sanctuary that's an iNaturalist site that if you can take observations there, and we'd love to help collect those there. And we partner with folks like Jorge and Anacostia Watershed Society on City Nature Challenge and bio blitzes and things like that. We're not going to talk in detail about those today, but I just wanted to mention we have a full suite of activities we do around it. So Greg is going to kick us off. Greg is our conservation outreach manager and manages not just creek critters, also water quality monitoring, and is an amazing educator. So go for it, Greg.
Thanks, Eliza. I'm going to give a brief overview of the programs and a little background. Eliza will do most of the talking about this connection to data and advocacy, and I'll join her on a couple of the programs. So first, our stream monitoring program is our water quality monitoring program, and that's our big community science program. Oops, having a little trouble with my, there we go. So our program, this again, it's a volunteer program. It's for monitoring freshwater streams in the region, and we're looking to assess and report on the health of streams. It's a volunteer-based program. Generally, we're going to have 4 to 6 people on a team working together. They'll get out and monitor 3 to 4 times a year. So it'll happen in the spring, summer, fall, and then optionally during the winter. Their primary task for this program is to conduct surveys of the aquatic macroinvertebrates. And then we have team leaders that are trained and certified annually to ID to the level of family in the field, and in some cases to the level of genus. And then all the surveys we do are catch and release. So once we've identified and counted the macroinvertebrates we find, we release them back in the stream. So this is our community science program. We have over 200 volunteers that take part in the program. And any given year, we'll have 150 to 200 volunteers will be out working with us at the streams. And they split up into 28 teams that work on 28 different monitoring sites currently. And we've been running this program since the early 90s. And our sites are mainly in Montgomery County, 22 sites in Montgomery County. We opened 2 in Prince George's last year. We have 1 in Howard County and 3 in Washington, D.C., and those are all associated with Rock Creek Park. And just so you can see where we're at, I'm not going to run through this slide. A lot of slides I'll go through very quickly, but just to give you an idea of where we're monitoring. And if you look at the Northwest branch right at the top of the 4 sites, we had 2 long-running sites in Montgomery County, another site that had been shut down. And then we opened 2 new sites on Northwest, or a new site on Northwest branch, also a new site on Sligo Creek, and those are our Prince George's County sites. I know Michael shared and mentioned, and I've also mentioned stream monitoring. For those of you who are on the call who may not know what that means, we're looking at macroinvertebrates, generally fairly small, big enough to see with the naked eye, maybe not big enough to identify without some magnification. But they're generally the bottom dwellers in our streams, and they're getting their oxygen, they're getting the dissolved oxygen from the water. And just the pictures of some of what we're finding, including aquatic worms, mollusks, crustaceans, insects. We do a lot of classes and field trainings on these. They're really fascinating to look at. So if you're out in Loudoun, join Michael when they're doing it. If you're in our area, and then in Maryland, come on and come out with us. And then the reason we look at them is because they serve as bioindicators. They have different levels of sensitivity to pollution and stress. And based on what we're finding, the numbers we're finding, and diversity, they're going to tell us a bit about stream health. And then when we're working with different algorithms for stream health. Our water quality monitoring program follows Maryland Department of Natural Resources benthic index of biotic integrity, the BIBI, and it's a fairly sophisticated algorithm. Each macroinvertebrate you find is rated between 0 and 10, 0 being least tolerant to pollution, the 10 are the least sensitive. And then there's several different metrics that are added into that based on what you're finding, and you get scores between 1 and 5, and that's how you start to rank your streams. The 3 charts on the right are charts that you would find on our website in our stream monitoring program. And these are sites that look over many years at the spring data. The top graph is an example of one that's going to have good to excellent health. The bottom, Normanstone, I was just there last week, and unfortunately we're still in the poor health. That's one that runs into Rock Creek Park, and it's mainly fed by stormwater. And then the data, the team leaders not only run their teams and organize everything and bring the equipment out, but they also enter the data into what we have as a Salesforce database. We share the data with different government agencies. We also post it on our website and on the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative's Chesapeake Data Explorer portal. And then we use the data, our partners use the data, and different researchers will use the data to inform advocacy positions. I'm going to turn it over to Eliza here to talk about the 10 Mile Creek campaign.
And I'm actually going to run some slightly complex screen sharing. So I'm going to take over the screen share from here. Let's see, you might need to stop, Greg. Nope, never mind, I can stop.
Did.
Great. All right, so thanks, Greg. So the 10 Mile Creek campaign, some of you may have heard of it. Feel free to raise your hand or pop in the chat if you've heard of the 10 Mile Creek campaign. It ran from about 2011 to 2014. 10 Mile Creek is in Upper Montgomery County, it feeds into the Little Seneca Reservoir, and the Little Seneca Reservoir is a backup drinking water supply, an emergency drinking water supply for most of the DC region in case something were to happen to the Potomac. The Occoquan Reservoir can serve a similar function. So it's there's a very important connection with the Little Seneca Reservoir, but most importantly, it was that 10 Mile Creek was very undeveloped, very rural and agricultural, still is mostly. And it was we considered it the last best creek in Montgomery County. And so there was a development proposal by Pulte Homes to amend the Clarksburg master plan, or rather under the existing allowable developments under the Clarksburg master plan, to buy a bunch of farmland and build a community there around Clarksburg. They did so. They bought a lot of land, and then we campaigned to save 10 Mile Creek on the last best creek in Montgomery County, were able to get the county council to pass a limited master plan amendment that placed an impervious surface cap on 10 Mile Creek. And one of the primary tools we had for this campaign was our long-term water quality monitoring data. This is Kathy Wiss, who is the former coordinator for our program and has been monitoring as a volunteer site on 10 Mile Creek since 1997. And we now have we have 2 sites on 10 Mile Creek and others on the Little Seneca now to this day, with long running data showing us that this is indeed a creek worth saving and worth keeping undeveloped. We knew how special it was. And here's what our team looks like. This is probably winter monitoring. We go out 4 times a year. So, to be able, it wasn't the only factor. So the fact that it was the backup drinking water supply was a very important factor, and that's what regionalized it. That led to letters from the DC Council and from Virginia. And that's what really, brought people together around it. But the reason we knew there was a campaign here, and that there was something worth saving was because of the water quality monitoring data. So those 2 things together created the sweet spot for this campaign. And so again, together they became the rallying cry: I drink water and I vote. This happened before me. My predecessor, Diane Cameron, led this campaign along with a very broad coalition, and they held rallies on the Montgomery County Council steps. And we had passionate water quality monitors and volunteers speaking to the county council about the bugs. They would get on and show slides to county council about the macroinvertebrates and talk about how sensitive they were to pollution and how even a little bit more impervious surface would harm them. And it was ultimately successful. We succeeded in that limited master plan amendment that placed a 10% impervious cap on development in the 10 Mile Creek watershed. So that's not nothing. Pulte has been able to build some of their project, but not as much as they had hoped. Another project I'm going to turn to is, I'm going to take you to, this is the dynamic screen share component of the day. So first I'm going to show you a little video tour here. This is a site called the North Fax Wex development in the city of Fairfax that in 2020, we were alerted by our friends at Friends of Accotink Creek. So we work all around the DC region. Most of our water monitoring is in Maryland, but our programs are throughout the region. And so we were alerted by Friends of Accotink Creek and some activists in the city of Fairfax that this property was slated for development. I'm going to show you a little video tour that Renee Grebe, our Northern Virginia conservation advocate, did.
We're here on Orchard Street in the city of Fairfax on the North Fax West property. And you can see a lot of it is currently in parking lot, which is a great place to redevelop. But there's also the North Fork of Accotink Creek that runs through this property. And lots of life in that stream. Fish and salamanders. Some macroinvertebrates as well. But even richer.
So the tree canopy was really important, but we were able to use Creek Critters, our Creek Critters app, to go out and do some collections. So we don't have a long-term site on the North Fork of the Accotink Creek, but Renee and Greg was there, and I think a couple of volunteers, maybe Greg's wife Lori, I think, came too. And they had to be very careful with private property because they were on this road, and the law says you can step into a stream, but you can't step on the bank. So they had to be very careful not to step onto the developer's property and get us into trouble. So they hopped right over the culvert to get their sample right there. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, we actually moved down a little bit. On the other side, there were the people living there were actually invited us to walk across their lawn and go down to a different part of the stream that they wanted to show us.
Oh, there you go. And one of the things we did, we put some press releases out, and they found you know, some critters. So as a result of creek critters. Now we don't have a reliable like BB, you know, benthic index of biodiversity here for this site. But what we have is that we found little fish, you know, we found salamanders, lots of salamanders. In fact, it was a salamander happy day. And some caddis flies and some mayflies. So, you know, probably the results would have put this stream in sort of fair category, but the developer was claiming it was poor. The developer claimed nothing lives in the stream and it's lifeless. And they had done macroinvertebrate surveys that they, and all sorts of biological surveys that they showed it was okay to develop. It was not very full of life. And we were able, well, we couldn't get a full suite of scientific data because we weren't allowed site access. You know, we could just through this very quick and easy form of sampling, prove them wrong. I'll admit we didn't win. They were able to proceed with development. They made a couple of modifications to the site plan to preserve a little bit more of the stream, but we succeeded in elevating it from what was basically a done deal, like you got your development permit, go for it, to a big community conversation that got the supervisors involved for the city and activated some city activists who hadn't worked on this kind of thing before. You can learn more about that at our blog post, which I'll pop in the chat for you. The next thing I wanted to show you was, oh, this is Greg. So Greg, it's okay if I operate the blog while you talk about what you found?
Yeah, sure. So our water quality monitoring teams, one of the things, I mean, in terms, and also in addition, I guess, to collecting the data, these are groups of people that are really familiar with stream sites throughout the county, throughout the region. And they keep an eye on what's going on. The government agencies cannot get out to all the streams in the area. And when they can get to streams, some of them may be visited once a year or once every 5 years. So the monitors, our volunteers, serve a really important role in pointing out what's happening in the streams. This top picture, I'm not sure if this is one we start with. Let's scroll down a little bit, Eliza. So this one was Northwest Branch, and they report incidents to us, and then we report incidents to the appropriate authorities. In this case, one of our monitoring teams came across a dam that was obviously not a dam, that was just something that, you know, some kids or a family had gone in and put some rocks across the water. This was boulders and large rocks. They had tarps, they had plywood in this. And so this one was reported to Montgomery County Parks, who came in and said, yeah, this is an illegal dam, and they took it down. They suspect it was somebody who was trying to get water that they could pipe illegally to a property nearby. That investigation's still going on. So the second one that we found in the fall was we had our team who just happened to be working in Little Falls. That's done by the Little Falls Watershed Alliance. And they were there to monitor for macroinvertebrates. And while they were in the water on a day that wasn't raining, and there hadn't been rain probably in a couple weeks, the water, all of a sudden, the levels started coming up really quickly, and they had to get out of the stream. You can see from the top right photo, the level of sediment in that water. And then the two photos below are after this settled a little bit, and you see the sediment in places where they just don't have sediment. We couldn't finish monitoring that day. And we've been watching it. It turns out that there was a water main break upstream at a construction site. And when we reported, at least at the time we reported this to the authorities, it had not been reported as it was supposed to be reported. And so Little Falls Watershed Alliance is keeping an eye on this. This is cleared, some of the sediment is flushed out, and they just monitored last week, but the numbers in terms of what they were finding and the diversity was lower than it normally is in that stream. Then the third incident that we described, this is up in Little Bennett Park at Dark Branch. And this is a really beautiful little stream that's in an area that's protected. It's got great stream buffers. But the stream has started to change the last couple of years. The picture on the right, it's hard to see, but there's some new sedimentation happening, and there's always been erosion there, but the erosion has really increased. And so we reported this to, again, Montgomery County Parks, and they met us out there, and we took a walk up the stream trying to figure out what was going on. And we think it's tied to a golf course upstream and their stormwater management ponds and how they're releasing water, but they don't know that yet. And so that investigation's going on too. So that's a really important role that these volunteers play. They know these areas intimately. They've been looking at them for a lot of years, and they know when something's happening.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. So we already got our 5-minute warning from Anna, and we have a couple other things to cover. So maybe I'll hold the screen share here. And should we skip the Meet Your Monitoring Team section and go straight to
we'll do this is really quick, and you can kind of skip through. So
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know what, this is what the monitoring looks like. And very quickly, we meet at our streams. We gather, we get organized. You go ahead and skip forward. We just collect our macroinvertebrates. We use nets to collect and get the macroinvertebrates into nets. Next screen, we try and move them from our nets into some kind of collection dish. In our case, we use dishwasher pans. Go forward. And from the pans, we start to pull macroinvertebrates out to isolate them so we can identify them and count them. Go ahead. And so again, there's people working around tables. These are all volunteers work. Well, there's Eliza on the left, but top left, but mostly volunteers who are pulling macroinvertebrates out for counting and identification. Go ahead, step forward, Eliza.
It's not me.
And then we're doing the identification counting, and those again, our certified team leaders are doing that. And we do some subsampling. So we're turning in data on the first 100 or so macroinvertebrates we find, and then we'll look through our collection bins and see if there's any particular families that we missed, and then we'll report on, add those to our count. So that's generally how that works. And if we step forward, we can give a brief overview of the Creek Critters. Creek Critters is our community engagement program. Go ahead and step forward. And so it refers to both a smartphone app that we developed in 2000, or we released in 2015, but mostly it refers to our engagement side. And we use these stream surveys and macroinvertebrate surveys to engage different groups of people. And it's always been a really popular activity, but we just tried to get a little more formal about how we did it. So you can skip forward. Again, briefly on the app, it provides guidance on getting into a stream, collecting macroinvertebrates and identifying them. And the idea behind this came from actually somebody who funded it, and who was a former stream monitor in Northern Virginia for us, who felt like we could put a tool in the hands of people and community groups, and people could get in and do some engagement work and also start getting some data and trying to figure out how healthy their streams were. And step forward again. And in this case, we're using just a really inexpensive set of supplies. We teach how to use the supplies, but we also teach different ways to do it with that. If you don't have any kind of net with you or don't have supplies, go ahead and step forward, Eliza.
Using a Frisbee as the collection pan.
Frisbees are great collection pans. Anything that you can see the macroinvertebrates moving around, so you can see behavior. Not only is it really cool to see, but it helps with identification. So from here, for the next few slides, you're just going to see that it's a similar process without following the strict protocols we follow with our water quality monitoring program. You got to get in, you got to capture the macroinvertebrates. You've got to do some identification. So we've tried to provide a visual key on about 30 macroinvertebrates that are commonly found. We step forward. And then people are creating stream health reports. In this case, we're using a fairly simple algorithm. We're rating everything as 1, 2, 3, 3 being the most sensitive to pollution intolerant and stressors. And so people get an idea about the health of the stream. The data from here, for a lot of the events that we were running and we continue to run, we know whether we've got somebody on site who can verify the data. And if it's verifiable data, we pass it on to Isaac Walton League Save Our Streams, and that ends up in the Isaac Walton League's Clean Water Hub, which is their community science hub. We also look at data that comes in from around the country, and if it's reasonable, we'll pass that data on too, and then Isaac Walton will do a second look at the data before they decide it's going to go on their map and go forward. And just some photos. I've put some screens together, some photos. Really what this is all about, and there's a lot of synergy between our water quality monitoring community science program and this engagement program. It's really about getting out into the parkland and meeting people and community groups and looking at the health of the streams and the relationships between stream health and the communities, and often the connection, as we all know, our stormwater drains. And so,
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, might as well. So really the guiding question is, and the question we get asked a lot and that we ask is, how healthy is the stream? In this case, how healthy is Long Branch? Go ahead, Eliza. And, so what it's about is using the community science program in a way that's a little more family friendly to engage, to start to learn about our partners, our communities around us, to provide some education, and then leading to action. Go ahead. And then there's just a couple more screens, I think, with photos. It looks a little different than our water quality monitoring program. We're working with families. And last screen, and then we do this often as a complementary activity to other activities. In this case, we had nature walks going, and people were moving between a nature walk station, stormwater management discussions, and our stream monitoring station, and people were in the stream monitoring. And but we also work this as a way, it's often the first time we meet people, and so it's a way that we often recruit people to our community science program. This is the first introduction a lot of people have to learning about stream health and starting to think about stream health issues, which in many cases, I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it, but like Long Branch, that morphed into a project where we looked at the litter collection in the community, and not looking so much at getting out and cleaning streams as much as the community doing outreach to their neighbors and friends, and trying to improve the recycling, trying to reduce litter, and definitely trying to reduce the litter that ended up in the streets. And that project is ongoing. It's been going on for 3 or 4 years. This Creek Critters has also helped us with funding, and helped more recently with funding for our water quality monitoring program, because of the engagement side of it. And then it really has helped us with coalition building.
It totally has.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Liza.
So Anna gave us until 1, so I have 1 minute to tell you guys about one other project. It's okay. So the Story of Streams is the last project that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to blaze through, is a report card project that we did, and I won't play the video because that'll use up all my time, over the last 2 years, and we're working on again as an update that collects data and people's stories about their streams, and then the idea is to move to action. We analyzed 3 streams, each of which has a friends group: Holmes Run, Northwest Branch, and Oxen Run around the region. For each of these streams, we have relationships. This is Creek Critters activities in Holmes Run that we help do. This is our Northwest Branch water quality monitoring teams. And this is our program called Ward 8 Water Watchers that gets people using Creek Critters out into Oxen Run. And we developed 16 total scores across 4 categories, and we're able to score and rate these 3 streams. And we plan to do this project again and bring in 3 to 6 new streams over the next year. We're waiting on some funding to find out exactly what the final number is. And in the water quality score, we were able to use our own citizen science gathered, our community scientists from Northwest Branch's data in that subscore. And we anticipate doing that again with some of the streams we're bringing on. We'll also have data for them. So that's really exciting that we're able to use our own data, mix it with a lot of other publicly available data. This is what the data, a small portion of what the data calculation sheets look like, in order to generate these scores. And then on our website, we have these tools that we want people to sign up to take action so they can be connected directly with those watershed groups and be informed of advocacy and volunteer opportunities. So we're still building out. Last year was a pilot year. This year, like I said, we have funding again to do at least 3, hopefully 6 more streams, and really continue to build out this project. And I'll leave it at that. You can see more on our website.
Thank you, Eliza, and thank you, Greg. Really, really interesting presentation. I have to say that these 2 presentations in particular have just been so fascinating, and they highlight why citizen science is so relevant and important in the region. It's, in my mind, it really brings together this combination of community and human engagement, along with hard data that can be presented at really key decision points in the public realm and the political realm. And I don't see any other way that some of that information could be provided. We have people in the network who are here who are deeply experienced in citizen science, and especially the members of the steering committee, but also some of the rest of you. I'm curious, what kind of sparks for you when you hear these presentations, and are there any questions that come to mind?
I'd like to ask a question to Eliza. The scores that you just posted for those 3 different places, including Oxen Run, is that little scorecard, is that publicly available? Because I do some work over there with the Friends of Oxen Run. I would just kind of love to look at that.
Yes. So the Friends of Oxen Run, Ab has his own stack of these brochures, and he can hand them to you anytime. And I have more. They do have our old logo on the bottom, but the website will point to the right place. And absolutely, it's all on our website. The methodology is detailed if you want to really nerd out on where we got all our data sets from, and you can explore both the individual streams and the background on the individual scores. Greg
Awesome.
just put the link in the chat to the website. And yes, whenever you're out there working with them, I think Ab keeps them in his house or his car. So, you know,
Okay,
remind him to bring his
I'll
stuff.
hit him up for some of those.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So go ahead, Kathy. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this dovetails really nicely with the watershed leader trainer program. I just, there was a Zoom last night with Rock Creek Conservancy, but I love engaging people of all ages with the critters as a way to get them not just picking up trash and cleaning up stuff, but being aware of what's living, what little critters that are there. So I just wanted to say congratulations on that and that philosophy to do that. And I love that they're using the citizens' data to try to make changes when there's threats from outside coming in, as were the examples that you gave. So thank you.
Stella, can I share?
Yeah, please. Yeah, please just dive in.
Yeah, I just was thinking a lot about how, I started doing citizen science as a educational activity with kids in like 2001. But back then it was so hard to find people who were using the data we collected. And so often what we were doing was primarily an engagement and inspirational activity. And so I just am so impressed both in general with how far the field has come in terms of marrying this work around community engagement with actual application and use of data. So the field more broadly has been doing that, and then these really specific examples is very inspiring to me about the utility. It's sort of like seeing what we always knew citizen science or community science had the capacity to do this, and now it's really making a difference, and we can articulate that through these very clear stories. And I just feel very fulfilled and motivated to know that.
Yeah, I felt the same. And also at the beginning of the presentation, especially Michael, when you were talking, but certainly Eliza and Greg as well, it really came home to me that we don't know what biodiversity have unless we're observing it and acknowledging it. And particularly now, out of Montreal, the Biodiversity Summit, and there's a request to all of the states and the metropolitan areas to actually start documenting the biodiversity of their region. And the only way we're going to get there is with this kind of work, I think. So it really, really was brought home to me. Carolyn, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, what strikes me too in all of this is the persistence. And I'm thinking about some of Michael's examples too of, having the data. And I think you mentioned, Michael, how long some of the different projects were running, but that is of interest too. And the fact that you're continue to pick up new projects like with your salt, street salt project too. I think that's awesome. But, as we've seen again and again, you got to stay on this stuff. You can't let it go. And I love your comment about having volunteers on the ground. And they know these places, and they're able, both presentations, that is such an important element of this, is to have people who are really intimately familiar with these sites so that they can notice the changes. And so anyway, kudos to all of you.
And I'll follow up on that comment too, Caroline, is that one of the frustrations that we have with our advocacy efforts is there'll be, say, a development application, and they're pulling the data from Fish and Wildlife Service or the state agency. And they're like, wood turtles may occur within a 2-mile radius, but they're like, well, they may occur, they may not, so we can just go forward. And it's sort of like, well, what if we know? What if we just go out and study it? And so one of the things that we're looking at is strategically, if we know that something's coming down the pipeline or may be coming down the pipeline, trying to think about sites proactively that have like potentially unique biodiversity, but then also these threats from development, and try to kind of like cut it off, like get ahead of it, so where it doesn't just come back, because then by then it's too late. They're like, we went through the process, they said it was fine, the development moves on. But if we as citizen science, we're a little bit more nimble, so we can get out there in the field and study these places, and then have the data to show, hey, wait, like you need to study this more. Like Eliza mentioned with the developer said the river was dead, there was nothing in it. Well, that's not true. So like what can we do and get ahead of it, to get ahead of the the legislative process on some of these developments as well?
Yeah, and I think as we've discovered too, is the developers are always going to be there. That development pressure where we are is always going to be there. So you do have to just stay so vigilant. So
And I also see the overlap. You've touched on it, on kind of just naturalist observation related to citizen science, just kind of bringing up that cadre of naturalists and master naturalists that are starting to grow in the region. It's almost like a step up toward the citizen science observation. You don't always have to be using an app to observe the trees along a stream, but you might start noticing, the water patterns are a little different, or the trees don't seem to be doing that well, and that could initiate a citizen science study. So that combination of naturalist observation as well as maybe data-driven citizen science, both are important, I think. Did you want to unmute?
Sorry. We had a question for all speakers in the chat from Beth. Are you able to pull data from iNaturalist also for your monitoring and advocacy projects?
I think Greg could speak to that more for us. He works pretty actively with iNaturalist for monitoring. I will say we haven't used it very actively for advocacy projects, and we probably could use it more.
Yeah, and with us, we've used iNaturalist a little bit. Birding, we have a lot more bird lists, and eBird data lists tend to be our go-to, but I do want to use, and one thing that I've thought about with iNaturalist is potentially doing like a BioBlitz in an area using iNaturalist to get like, point data like really quickly on a broad variety of topics. So something that we've thought about, but may not be using to our fullest capacity.
So what apps or programs are you all using? It seems like we've got the Creek Critters app, iNaturalist, maybe to a lesser extent so far, eBird. What about amphibians? What are your observation methods for amphibians?
So for our organization, we are encouraging people to do it into iNaturalist. So we created a project for all herpetology to go into a project so we can look at any of the herpetology, reptiles and amphibians documented in Loudoun County. But then with our amphibian program. We used to use a protocol by the North American Amphibian Monitoring Project, which no longer exists. So we're using Frog Watch for frog calls and data. So I don't think there's an app for that right now. But that's those are some of the methodologies that we're using. And we had created like a Loudoun amphibian monitoring program based off of the North American Amphibian Monitoring Program. That's now defunct.
So I didn't jump in before when Eliza mentioned my name. So for iNaturalist, a couple ways we use it, and mostly we're using it when we're working with Orhe and Anacostia Watershed Society, because when we work with Orhe, we're either doing these bio blitzes someplace, and it's built into the bio blitzes that he does, or we're working with the Watershed Stewards Academy, and in that case, we're loading our data through Creek Critters, but we're also trying to update through iNaturalist. And then some of our team leaders on the water quality monitoring program, they tend to use iNaturalist when they find something unusual. And so it's not only to report what they're finding, but also to get some idea or maybe a little bit of help with ID. And they find it useful for that.
I have a question about bioacoustic monitoring, Michael. When you talked about there's someone that does it in zones for you, just because I've never heard of that before. I know there's like cameras put out in the field that are mounted field cameras to camera traps, but is it the same for sound? Do they put things, strap things up to record, or is it more sort of on the go and not for long periods of time?
That's a great question. I was trying to find a picture, but I was kind of scrambling to pull together my slides. But basically, it's sort of like a permanent post. So it sort of has it's like a singular post that's braced so it can withstand the wind, and it's a metal pole. And then it has sort of like, I don't know what to call it, but like a bar straight across. And then it's like a device that goes in the middle. So what he's done is he puts it up in the springtime and then keeps it up throughout the summer to get more data. For the for NABIT, I think they were really only were looking for data for specific periods, but he's like, I'll collect it for the whole summer flight season, because you get different bats flying at different times. And then he'll go I think it's about every month to replace the memory cards and keep it up. And then he took down just the device at the end of the summer, but the stand itself, he's been keeping them at those sites, and he got permission at mostly public parks, but then also some private parks or private parcels that we were able to connect them with. So sort of the framework is a temporary structure, but it can withstand the elements. So he's just left them up and then just replaced the device, the bioacoustic device.
Awesome, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And I think a question just came across chat.
Is there good enhancing mic to hook to a phone to better Merlin bird sounds? Ooh, I feel like I read an article about that recently, maybe that Audubon did. I think people have rated different little mics that you can plug into your phone, but are there any birders that use mics on this call?
I wish I knew, because my microphone is full of lint from my pocket, so it does a very poor job of capturing the sounds. So if anybody knows, I'd be interested.
Yeah, I'll see if I feel like I read an article about it in the last 6 months or something, and when we send a follow-up, I can see if I can drop that as a link.
So I can only see 8 people at a time on my screen because I'm on my phone. So if there are people who have wanted to raise their hand for questions on it, are we missing anyone, or I'm just not seeing them?
So we've had some really great comments, and thanks for the speakers for putting in links to questions that people are answering. I encourage you guys, we will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording and any salient links and things that are in the chat here. Note that you can save the chat locally on your computer by clicking the 3 dots at the bottom under the chat. It says save chat, and it'll save it on your computer somewhere.
Okay, all right. So, there are two people I'm going to pick on, and you guys don't hate me, but I'm curious what Alonso and Serenella, sorry, not Alonso, but Jorge and Serenella are thinking. They're both deeply experienced naturalists, scientists, and they work with citizen scientists. So if you're not triple tasking, I'm very curious what Jorge and Serenella kind of think about this, and maybe some of their thoughts on these presentations.
Bring it on, amigos.
Thank you, Stella. So in my experience, iNaturalist can be very empowering when you're trying to work with families, because many times the parents are out there trying to engage the children, but they don't know what they're looking at. And placing iNaturalist in the palm of their hands as a tool that they can use to be the experts within their nuclear family, it's very empowering for the parents and very enriching for the kids. It's another way that we can also expand the capacity of learning and teaching beyond the interpretative time that we have out there with the families. So teaching them how to make observations in their own time expands that learning time that they have, and captures that curiosity and that need for learning beyond what the leader can do in a particular event.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. And first of all, great presentations, great projects. I'm more familiar with Nature Forward because we're been partners for a number of years now, but I'm really impressed with the work that Michael is doing in Loudoun County. Awesome work. And yeah, to second what Serenella was saying, iNaturalist has been our go-to citizen science platform, just because it's pretty big here in the DC region and growing. We've seen with our BioBlitz and City Nature Challenge that has been growing every year. So it's sort of a natural platform to keep growing on, and great to see that other people are using it for this type of citizen science efforts. Yep.
Thank you, Jorge. We have a question from Mary or comment.
Actually, just was referring back to a question I saw come through chat from Lucila about collecting information or doing evaluations about the experience of volunteers. And I know Eliza had talked about that a little bit, and that you've sometimes done surveys of volunteers, not as regularly as we could though, which I'm sure we all can agree with, that we would love to do more of that. But I was just curious if anyone here has done that kind of actual surveying of the volunteers or participants in citizen science or community science, and have sort of a sense of the impact on the volunteers themselves. And if not, that might be a topic for a future, or regardless of what the answer is, it could be a good topic for a future conversation of this group to actually look at how can we measure and capture the impact on the people beyond the use of the scientific data.
That's a really interesting question, and I wonder if our presenters have any thoughts on that. I think can be fairly transformative from what I've seen, those of us that are active citizen scientists and people I've met, but I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah,
Michael,
to add on that, I think we all agree with that. But then, like, when we're going to funders or convincing our bosses that it's something worth investing in, we need like a way to really demonstrate the impact on people. So just really
actual studies, yeah.
How other people have captured that. It looks like Serenella might have a response.
Yeah, so I don't have surveys, but I do have that data, anecdotal data from the relationships that I cultivate with my volunteers, and it really changes their perspective and how they look at the natural world around them. So very much like the topic that I was exploring about the families, when you have master naturalists and volunteers that actively engage with the platform, you are seeing that growth in their base knowledge every day or every week, as much as they put effort into it. I've created projects. Right now there is Mycology at Nature Forward project, where I'm able to interact with the volunteers and monitor what they are learning with regards to mycology, to expand their knowledge after the class or after training session that I've had with them. So you're able to see how they are using it as a learning tool for themselves, and they start to connect with experts. So I think it would be really easy to just put together a survey that translates that anecdotal information into black and white, but the growth is there, the progress is there. And once you got the master naturalist involved in a naturalist, you really have a good set of master naturalists that are training themselves after what you've provided them.
Thank you, Serenella. We have Lucila has raised her hand.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up this question. This is something I'm always curious about as both a volunteer coordinator and a citizen science coordinator at the site I work at now and in previous positions. And something I'm always wondering is what motivates a volunteer to feel like they can continue to engage in this type of activity? And if they can't, what sort of, how could we mold the experience in a way that if they're only with us for one time, that we're really giving them what they're looking for based on their age group? Because people in different age groups are looking for different types of experiences or maybe of different backgrounds. And I think anecdotal data is very helpful. It's really helpful, Serenella, to hear you talk about that. And in addition, I'm always thinking of how do I collect actual more quantitative data that I can take to donors and demonstrate, hey, this is how we're designing it. This is what we're seeing as a result. And this is how your funding could help us continue these types of programs. But also for us to know where we can iterate if we're not achieving the objectives that we're looking for. I don't have any real answers on how to get that type of information. So I'm interested if this group tackles that. I would love to hear what comes out of that or be involved in that conversation in one way or another. But thanks for considering.
And we have about 2 more minutes for the question exchange.
Sure. Thanks so much for Lucila. I've been taking some notes on that, and the steering committee obviously will take that into consideration for a future meeting. Megan, looks like you put a link in the chat, and do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to share some research from a citizen science program several years ago called eMammal, and I know Robert Costello is familiar with it. It's a publication that's entitled Creating Advocates for Mammal Conservation Through Citizen Science, and it was a before and after social science study on the individuals that were participating in the eMammal project. So I think that it aligns with what there was a question around, like surveying citizen science and their involvement. So that I just wanted to share that one resource that I knew about.
Thanks, Megan.
That's great. Thank you, Megan. So I think now Anna's going to do her favorite thing, which is have us take a selfie together. And
yeah,
then,
go ahead.
And then let's do 3 or 4 minutes for announcements, because we always promise to leave people time for announcements. Go ahead.
Put your camera on if you want to participate. We like to post this, fix your hair, if you, whatever you need to do. I'm going to let people's cameras light up here for a second. Basically, I'm going to ask you to hold your hand up like you're waving, but you're not going to wave because it'll be fuzzy in the picture. So it's like a fake wave, but it's cute and like it looks like a good time. Okay, so I'm just watching a couple more things light up. If there's anybody else, I'm just going to give you guys a minute. It's only take a second. It's super fun and super nerdy. It's something we do on all of our programs. Okay, I think. Okay, I'm going to Okay, everybody hold up in your smile and okay, okay. I still have more people logging in. Come on, turn on your cameras, people. Okay, 1, 2, 3. It looks good, looks good. Okay, I'm just checking page 2. Yeah, let me do it one more time. Okay, one more time. So 1, 2, 3. All right, we gotcha. Thank you. Appreciate it.
It wouldn't be a network meeting without Anna doing that. And now, well, first, let me do just big thank you before we all log off. We do still have a few more minutes. Michael, Eliza, and Greg, thank you very much for these really insightful and very interesting conversations. So big thanks from all of us. Appreciate your time and the great work that you're doing. And let's throw out some announcement. What are people doing? Do you have any events coming up? Any interesting studies that just came out you're dying to let people know about? We have about 4 minutes.
And you can also put them in the chat too if you have links that you want to share.
I'll share that we are still selling early bird ticket prices for Taking Nature Black Conference, and we would love to have you there and have you share it out. If you're an organization, if you're part of an organization that works with large groups of people, even if you're not a sponsor of the conference, there's a way to get a discounted block of tickets that you can then hand out on your own to anybody you'd like to. And we'd love to encourage groups to take advantage of that. It's cheaper than being a sponsor.
I'll go ahead and put a plug out for the City Nature Challenge. Lots of us nature nerds on the call here involved with the City Nature Challenge. That's coming up April 28th to May 1st. We've already started our series of organizational meetings. So if you're interested in that, hearing more about the City Nature Challenge, feel free to indicate that in the chat. We can follow up with you and make sure that you get on the Google group that is the cool group that's in the know about all things City Nature Challenge.
I should note the applications for the DC Master Naturalist program are out. And if you have a friend who is thinking about becoming a Master Naturalist, or even you are, you can apply through the 28th of the month. Carrie, surely you have something.
No, I was just going to say City Nature Challenge, so Anna covered it.
Great. Anybody else? Any programs coming up at the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy, Michael?
We have so many programs,
do.
too many to list. But in addition to our frog training, we did also have a bluebird nest box monitoring training recently. We're trying to get those record those and put videos up. But you can go to our website for all of our events. We have, between citizen science, education, habitat conservation, we always have a ton of stuff. Too much to mention.
Thank you, Michael. Robert has put a note in the chat that there's an internship, a paid internship opportunity involving community science. So that link is in the chat. So again, you can save the chat if you want instant access to all this information that people have been sharing by clicking the little dots in the little message box there in the chat, and it says save. You can save the chat.
Well, if we have concluded, then I want to thank everybody for joining us. Another great meeting of the Washington, D.C. Area Citizen Science Network and our guests. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Stella. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, guys.